What if I told you that for over 25 years, an entire family lived hidden in the cliffs of Scotland, feeding on travelers, raising their children on human flesh, and no one noticed? Off the stormy western coast of Galloway, beneath jagged rocks and roaring waves, there's a cave that locals still refuse to enter after dark. They say the wind there doesn't just howl, it whispers. For centuries, a story has haunted this land, a story of a man named Sawney Bean, his savage wife, and the bloodline of cannibals they spawned beneath the earth. It began with missing travelers and ended with the most gruesome mass execution in Scottish history. How a poor couple built a secret society of killers in a sea cave. What investigators found when they finally entered that darkness, and the chilling question historians still ask today: was Sawney Bean ever real, or the product of England's darkest propaganda? This is more than a horror story. It's a mirror, reflecting what happens when fear, isolation, and myth consume a people. But before we enter the cave, let me ask you, have you ever heard a legend so horrifying you wondered if some part of it had to be true? If you believe that stories survive for a reason and that some of them still breathe beneath the surface of history, then follow me, because the tide is going out and the mouth of the cave is open. In the late 15th, or perhaps the early 16th century, no one is quite sure anymore. Travelers began to vanish along a lonely stretch of coastal road in southwestern Scotland. The region was Galloway, a windswept, untamed place where mist clings to the heather and the sea hammers jagged cliffs like a warning drum. At first, no one asked too many questions. A merchant gone missing? Likely robbed. A young couple disappearing on a moonlit ride? Bandits or worse? Perhaps they ran away together. Caravans found abandoned, horses still tied, wheels broken, the driver's coat soaked in blood, but no body to be found. Whispers began to slither through the villages. They called it the Devil's Road. And what made it worse was that nothing was ever found. No thieves caught, no bodies buried, no answers, just silence. And in that silence, fear took root. Children were warned not to stray from home after sunset. Mothers clutched their rosaries tighter when husbands were late. Men sharpened blades and refused to ride alone. But even then, they vanished. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Gone without trace. It wasn't just a crime wave. It was a sickness spreading across the land. Even the crown grew uneasy. The loss of merchants and tax routes became too much to ignore. And so, search parties were formed. The king's men swept the woods. They scoured ravines, tracked through swamps, combed through villages. Nothing. No campfires. No outlaws. No rebel camps. It was as if the earth itself was swallowing people whole. But the earth had help. And it wasn't long before strange things began to wash ashore. A hand, a foot, a half-dissolved head, jaw clenched as if it had screamed its last into the tide. Still, no one could explain it. The bodies didn't match the missing. Some parts were too fresh, some too decayed. And always, they came from the same direction, the cliffs near Benane Head. The fishermen refused to dock there. The shepherds changed their grazing routes. Even the dogs wouldn't go near the cave when the tide was low. No one knows the exact death toll. Some say it was 50, some over 1,000. But what is known is that the terror didn't stop until one man fought back. And that's when the whispers became a roar, and Scotland looked straight into the eyes of the beast. Every legend has a beginning, and this one begins in dirt. His name was Alexander Bean. though history has chosen to remember him as Sawney, a crude nickname perhaps, but fitting for a man history cannot quite place. He wasn't born a monster. No one ever is. He came from the soil, the son of a ditch digger, born near East Lothian, a land of bogs and stone walls, a boy of no privilege, no land, no legacy. He was a nobody in a time when being a nobody could kill you. Some say he was lazy. Others say he refused honest work. But one thing is certain, Sawney Bean hated the world that rejected him. And then he met Agnes Douglas, a woman feared even more than him. Locals whispered she was a witch, that she'd once sacrificed her former lover in a ritual under the full moon, that she consorted with shadows and heard voices from beneath the earth. She, too, had no place among people. So they ran, together. Not to a new town, not to another village, but to the cliffs. And there, hidden deep within a narrow sea cave near Benane Head, they began a new life. Not as husband and wife, but as something else entirely. Partners in isolation, in defiance, in hatred. The cave was perfect, nearly 200 meters deep, inaccessible at high tide, a womb of darkness that no sunlight could pierce. There were no taxes, no kings, no priests, only hunger and silence. They survived at first by stealing, then robbing, then killing, and then the final step, the one that cannot be undone. They ate flesh, cooked, salted, smoked, stored in jars, laid bare on rocks. No more markets, no more begging, only meat and darkness, and eventually, children. Agnes gave birth to 14 of them, and those children bred more children. A family tree that grew sideways, twisting and coiling within the womb of the cave. 48 strong by the end, all raised in blackness, all taught that humans were meat. Folklore remembers them as monsters, but monsters don't rise in sunlight. They're made, slowly, in places where no one's watching. And for nearly 3 decades, no one watched what was growing beneath Benane Head. At first, it was just about survival. The sea gave them little, the land even less. No crops grew near the salt-soaked cliffs, and no one would hire a man like Sawney Bean, especially not one who smelled of smoke and salt, and whose wife was said to whisper to rocks. So they waited, in the shadows, until someone passed by, alone. They killed, quick, brutal, without hesitation, a cut throat, a broken skull, and then silence. They stole money, clothes, jewelry, but something was missing, something deeper than gold. Because money required markets, and markets meant exposure. No, what they needed was meat. So they brought the bodies back to the cave, laid them on rocks, warm and slick, carved them open, divided the limbs like butchers in a chapel. The thighs were best, then the arms, the liver, tender, the heart, sacred. At first, they cooked over small fires. Later, they salted and hung strips from the ceiling. Others, they smoked over driftwood, so the stench wouldn't rise when the tide was high. The cave became a kitchen, but not one of clay pots and firewood. It was a cathedral of death. Bones in piles, skulls with tongues removed, barrels filled with pickled flesh, children sleeping beside jars of hands and feet. And still, they kept killing. Because the more they ate, the more they hungered. Because hunger, once fed by blood, is not a thing easily forgotten. And so, the family grew. Children born beneath stalactites, raised on stories of a world that had forsaken them, a world that was not to be trusted, only devoured. They knew no prayers, no laws, only instinct and ritual. When they grew strong enough, the children joined the hunt. Daughters lured victims. Sons slit throats. Together, they feasted under the rhythm of the waves. It wasn't just murder, it was inheritance. A tradition of blood passed down like a family name. A society that operated not in defiance of humanity, but outside it entirely. The sea has a habit of keeping secrets, but it also has a cruel sense of timing. Because what it swallows, it eventually gives back. And one morning, it did. A fisherman, walking the shore near Ballantrae, saw something caught in the rocks. At first, he thought it was driftwood, but as he got closer, he saw flesh, a leg, still pink, gnawed, half burnt. He vomited, ran, and told no one. Because in places like this, you don't speak of what the sea brings home. But then came another. A hand, curled like it was still trying to crawl. A child's foot, bitten clean at the ankle. A woman's head, mouth still open in a final scream. But her eyes were gone. Soon, these horrors weren't just rumors. They were evidence. Villagers began to whisper again, this time louder. They spoke of sea witches, wolves with human faces, a demon clan that hunted under the moonlight. Fathers kept swords near their beds. Mothers tied charms to their children's wrists. The church held mass exorcisms, but even the priests feared walking near the coast after sundown. The Benane head cave, once ignored, became a place of legend. No one went near it. Even the animals kept away, as if they knew what humanity refused to admit. Meanwhile, justice failed. With no clear suspect, the wrong people paid. Wanderers, hermits, even innocent villagers were dragged before judges, tortured into confessions for crimes they hadn't committed. Some were executed. Others vanished, ironically, without a trace. The Bean family, from their damp cathedral of stone and bone, watched and feasted. The fear fed them. Because fear weakens memory, fear delays logic, and fear makes monsters harder to find. By now, hundreds were gone. Merchants, pilgrims, young couples, whole families, and still, the crown remained blind. Until one night, they chose the wrong victim. Evil grows bold with time, and the Bean clan grew arrogant. For nearly 25 years, they had stalked the lonely roads, the gullies and cliffs, killing with silence, devouring in darkness. But one night, they made a mistake, and it was their last. A nobleman was traveling the Galloway coast with his wife, riding late after a family gathering. The road was empty, the moon full. They never saw the attack coming. From the cliffs, the Bean family surged. Men, women, even children, all wild-eyed, growling like animals. They dragged the noblewoman from her horse. She screamed. By the time her husband turned, she was already dead. Throat slashed, body torn apart, like game meat. But he fought back. With a sword meant for show, he struck one of them in the neck, then another. Blood sprayed the dirt road. A horse reared. A torch fell. In the chaos, the nobleman escaped, alone, furious, and carrying names. He rode through the night, his hands still sticky with blood. By dawn, he stood before King James VI and told a story no sane man should believe. But the king, for once, listened. Because the disappearances, the whispers, the body parts on the beach, had haunted even the throne. And now, he had a survivor. That same week, the king rode with 400 men, soldiers, bloodhounds, executioners, even priests. They combed the coast of Benane Head and waited for low tide. When the cave finally revealed its mouth, the men lit torches and went in. What they found was not a camp. It was a charnel house. Dozens of bodies in stages of decay. Limbs hanging like meat in a butcher's shop. Barrels of salted flesh. Jars of eyes, carefully arranged. Bones, child bones, scattered like driftwood. The smell made strong men vomit. Some soldiers never spoke again. But the family was still inside, 48 of them, naked, screaming, hissing. Some tried to bite the guards as they were dragged into daylight. It was the first sun they had ever seen. The king gave no trial, only a sentence. The men were dismembered alive. Hands, feet, genitals, then hung until dead. The women and children were burned at the stake. Some wailed, others laughed. Not one was spared, not even the infants. That day, justice came to Galloway, but it came too late for the hundreds who had disappeared. Eaten, forgotten, buried in the dark. The people cheered, but the wind still carried whispers, and the cave remained. So now we come to the question that haunts every dark tale. Was it true? Did a clan of cannibals really live in the caves of Benane Head, murdering and eating hundreds over decades, beneath the nose of kings, priests, and common folk? Or was Sawney Bean nothing more than a story? A ghost sown from fear, a fable written in blood. There are no official records from the 15th or 16th century that mention his trial or even his name. No surviving documents, no court transcripts, no burial logs, no royal decrees, nothing. The first detailed accounts appear centuries later, in 18th century English pamphlets and folklore collections. So why tell the story? Some scholars believe it was Tudor propaganda, a monstrous caricature of wild, lawless Scots meant to justify England's rule. They eat their own people, the stories whispered. They live like beasts, breed like demons. A perfect reason to civilize them, or conquer them. Others suggest it was simply a cautionary tale, a fireside horror meant to warn children. Don't stray off the road. Don't trust strangers. Don't ignore what the land tries to tell you. Like tales of the Wendigo in North America, or Hansel and Gretel in Europe, Sawney Bean was a metaphor for hunger, isolation, and what happens when people turn away from community and into shadow. But what if there's some truth beneath the myth? What if a small clan really did vanish from society, lived in a cave, killed a few travelers, and their story, over time, was stretched, twisted, until it became legend? After all, caves like Benane Head still exist. You can walk into them today, and some who do say they smell something strange or hear things when the tide begins to rise. In the end, whether Sawney Bean lived or not, his legacy survives, not just in books or old Scottish ballads, but in the deeper fear he represents. The fear that beneath the surface of civilization, there's something still hungry, something forgotten, something human that chooses not to be. Legends are born in darkness, but they survive because we still believe they might be true. What do you think? Was Sawney Bean a real man, or just the monster we needed to invent? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're brave enough, visit Ben Ain Head and see what the tide has to say.